All right, you guys, thank you for coming back for another episode of One Tribe Rising, or another episode, I'm so sorry, on Modern Day Prophets, Rising from Soul. I'm your host, Dustin Wheeler, and represented by One Tribe Rising. I wanted to introduce these two that I'm going to have on speaking today because just a simple conversation that I had with these two on Saturday in Grand Rapids. It was at a peaceful protest, and what they said to me really impacted me and really like made a difference in my life. And so I really feel like they have something to say, and I feel like they have a message that we need to hear. So I've invited them today to just kind of have an
Hey,
honest.
Dustin, I'm so sorry. The alarm in my apartment is going off. What are
Okay.
the chances right when you start recording?
All right, you guys, we are back after a very short delay. Real life happens. So, okay, so we're going to have Derrick introduce himself first, and Carlson is dealing with some fire alarms going off. So as soon as that stops, he's going to jump back on, but we're going to start with Derrick here.
All right, thank you, Dustin. So I'm Derrick Chia. So I'm a public health epidemiologist, and I just like to introduce myself as a human. I'm Black, of course, and Dustin and I did meet back on Saturday at the peaceful protest here in Grand Rapids. It's really nice meeting you, Dustin, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And thank you for hosting us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really excited for you both to be here, and in God's timing, hopefully these fire alarms can turn off so we can have both participate in the conversation. But you guys, what we're really here for is to kind of bridge that gap in having difficult conversations. And I want to show you guys to just the power that one has, because coming through, finding a story that came across my Facebook feed of Deontay's, and just seeing the light of that and reaching out to him, and him telling me that he was going to be down at the protest, and me deciding on a whim that I was going to go down there. And what I realized is that I was really being led by God that day. Like, it
Oh
was
yeah.
not about my timing, it was about God's timing.
Oh
And
yeah.
everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and it was still in God's timing. And I went, oh yeah, okay. So we started these conversations downtown. Like, one of the I think Carlson was the one that maybe stopped me after he'd seen me talking to somebody else. And so I was really excited, first off, that you guys noticed, that you were paying attention, and then also brave enough to reach out to say, hey, I've got something to say.
Yep.
And the whole kind of intention of that interview was to look at the messages that we're carrying forward, and what's a better message that we can carry forward.
Yep.
And what I was talking about with Carlson was that, and I'm going to be real honest with this audience here, because I want to show you like the vulnerability that we need to start having these conversations. And before this protest, before something that Carlson said to me, when I heard Black Lives Matter, and I didn't know anything about what it was or the movement or anything like that, all I saw was Black Lives Matter. And what I didn't realize until Saturday was that I was having this internal knee-jerk reaction to that. And I dismissed it, but what Carlson said to me really brought that to the forefront, that I was having this knee-jerk reaction. And he talked about leaning into our compassion. And it's not that I didn't have compassion for people with Black skin, or anybody that's a different colored skin. It was that I truly believe that all lives matter. But there was something about my ego that literally, like, that was having this, it's taking away from. And when Carlson said leaning to your compassion, it literally like connected these dots.
Yep.
Because you guys, I consider myself extremely compassionate, extremely open-minded, extremely loving, but I will wholeheartedly admit that I was having this reaction. And so I know that I'm not the only one. I know that I'm not the only one that just hasn't connected these dots yet. So I want to talk about too, like how we can connect these dots, because the message that I came away with from what Carlson was saying was it wasn't taking away, like our brothers and sisters are in trouble. And this is our opportunity to stand up and speak out in the way of compassion, in the way of love. And so, I want, first and foremost, I want to apologize for not looking at that sooner and not realizing and recognizing that I was having that reaction, because as soon as I saw the value in knowing the message to carry forward, it opened up so much. It opened up so much compassion. It opened up so much empathy, and it opened up so much responsibility in me to do these interviews and to invite you guys back so you can start talking about the messages that you need to share.
Right. Hey, Dustin, first of all, I mean, I was really happy to see you that day and seeing you trying to talk to people and understand why they're there. Because again, we came out there to protest. That's to express ourselves, to make sure we're being heard, and just to communicate. And just any platform we saw we could pass a message across, we appreciated that. And you coming to us and saying, hey, why are you here today? That was a moment of thinking for me. I was like, hey, I can give you a million reasons for why I'm here today, but really, how can I articulate this in just a sentence or two, right? So just looking around what's happening lately, the way I like to put it, I like saying, right now, we're facing an awakening in the US. So we're in a period of a response to an epidemic. Like, if you remember earlier, I said I'm an epidemiologist, and I study disease trends and all that. And I look at this like an epidemic, and this is the people's response to an epidemic for a long time. So what we've been seeing is, first of all, it's important to note that this protest we protested, or all the movements we're seeing around right now, it's not just about the killing of George Floyd. That's just one of the triggers. That's a piece of the puzzle. We're talking about something here, a multi-century oppression of people based on their race. We're protesting against racism at both the individual and institutional level, which we can actually see how it affects us as a people. So Carlson and I did highlight the importance of empathy and just being there to say, hey, this is the right thing to do. This is what is expected of me. Just because I am, say, for example, you're not Black and someone else is protesting for pro-Black lives, it doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. So if your neighbor's house is on fire, you just can't see that and say, oh, that's across the street. Guess what's going to happen if that's not taken care of? It's going to come over to your house, right? So when we start normalizing systemic ills and just start normalizing stuff like this, it actually creeps up on us and it affects us too. Yeah. And so there's a lot more to it. I'm going to like to dive deeper into it, but I'm going to let Carlson chime in on this first.
Are you? Oh, good. Carlson is all set. Oh, thank you for noticing that. All right. I was literally so deep into what you were saying. Okay. All right, Carlson, we've got you live now. Go ahead.
Sorry about my fire alarm. So first of all, I'm Carlson, and I'm a Scrum Master at Meijer. I work in the IT area. I like to say that we help people get your groceries. So that's what I'm in the business of. To begin off, my thoughts and prayers to George's family, to the families of those that have been hurt by this act and by similar acts in the past. It's very unfortunate. And I just pray for God's strength as they deal with this. Just want to highlight the fact, Dustin, that Derrick and I are from Cameroon. We were born and raised in Cameroon in West Africa. And I moved here to go to college as a teenager. I went to Grand Valley. I've been here in Grand Rapids ever since then. Graduated and then started work. So that's a little bit about myself.
Okay. I have a question about being from Africa, because I had two amazing conversations of Sia and Kenneth that I met, and they were GVSU students at Riverside Park, and they let me ask them all sorts of questions about just how they thought of the United States, what was different,
Mm-hmm.
and their way of living. And I remember Sia saying something about how she even put her foot in her mouth here when she came here, because from her perspective in Africa, color wasn't used as an identity. It was used as a shade. Like, and so she would say that she even had very dark skinned friends who had maybe lighter skinned babies, and she would call that white or light, and this person would react. And so we really looked at just how much we do identify with color. Is that like where you grew up in Africa, or where you're from? Like, how was color perceived there?
Yeah. So um, in sub-Saharan Africa, majority of us are Black. We
Mm-hmm.
don't have the same issues per se like there are here between different races. So because of that, I will acknowledge that we have our own issues. We have issues between tribes,
Okay.
between regions, between the French speaking and the English speaking. Um, they just come in different flavors, and
Mm-hmm.
all of that goes back to the history of colonialism,
Mm-hmm.
which is rooted in our systems and what we're living in right now. And then coming to America and seeing America's own issues, and just acknowledging that we're we all have some issues we have to work through, some broken systems we have to fix, and more than ever before, am I hopeful.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I feel like the right people are starting to stand up and starting to just be willing to look at things from a different perspective. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's what it's really going to take, is being, and it's going to cause some of these identities that we have, they're going to have to go.
Right.
And me coming from a personal development background, like, there are deaths of an identity. And I think as we grow as people and human beings, the identity of color, we're going to have to start looking at things in a different way, in a different perspective from that, because we miss so much when we choose to identify with these things as inflexible.
Right.
And I think that the more flexible that we can be with our language, and understanding and defining, like, what does that mean, that the more that we can open up our hearts to each other, and really start to just experience the amazingness of this life. I cannot say that what a terrible loss it would be if I would have never met you two.
We're honored, Dustin. We're honored to be part of your platform and be able to lean into the conversation.
So, with what have you guys experienced this week? Because we went from the peaceful protest to the riots on Saturday to, another gathering on Sunday of the rebuilding of, people came together to rebuild the city, to another peaceful protest on Wednesday, to the National Guard coming in. Like, how has this impacted your world, and how have you grown just through it in this last week?
Yeah, Dustin, that's a really great question. It's been an emotional roller coaster for me, and there's been days where I look at it, I'm like, hey, what's happening? So it all started off on Saturday with the march, but of course we know everything didn't end up peacefully like it was when you and I were there.
Mm-hmm.
And so just the moment, so when I was there during the first march, I was so empowered just to see people come together for a common cause. I saw really inspiring messages people wrote. I saw people of every demographic, men, women, disabled persons. I saw kids, and it was just a life-changing moment, right? So that really gave me so much hope. And hey, I'm like, hey, this is really what we need. These are the allies we need, and just acknowledging that, hey, being pro-Black life doesn't make us anti-white. It doesn't make us left or right. It actually just makes us pro-human. And so that was really a moment of hope for me. But then personally, I'd been just, you know, walking away from watching the video of the killing of George Floyd. May so rest in peace. So I came across this New York Times article, and I'm reading, and the video was embedded in there. That was Monday night. So I finally watched the video, and that really, to me, first of all, the reason I wasn't watching it is because I've seen so many of those videos, right? It's like a circle. So there's a killing, there's the video, you watch it, the authorities justify, hey, this person had some interaction with the cops 20 years ago.
Yeah.
They try to make up reasons why this person was killed. And so there's just this circle that you just understand that's what's going to happen, so you don't want to deal with it anymore.
I agree. We have to be careful with what we consume.
Right. So, but then on Monday I saw that, and that really made it worse for me.
Yeah.
But then I if I'm to say the kind of person I am, I'd say I'm pretty optimistic. I try to see the positive in everything. So going back to Sunday, the turnout I saw in Grand Rapids to clean up the town, right? Just everyone. Like, it was really just empowering to see that. And even in the course of the week, I've had people, people are having good conversations about it, I've had people reach out to me directly, like, hey, what do you like? Hey, I'm not a person of color, I'm not a Black person, but what do you think I can do, right? And I apologize to some of my friends whom I haven't responded to yet, just because time flies by really fast, and sometimes you just need to process stuff. But I think just seeing this wave of people empathizing and relating and connecting with what is actually happening, it's really been it's really given me so much hope.
Yeah, I would echo Derrick's response in terms of hope. Like I mentioned earlier, never before have I felt optimistic about our future. It was just inspiring seeing all different kinds of people out on Saturday. Despite COVID-19, to see people risk the resurgence of the virus because of something that is bigger here at hand. To see the signs like Derrick described earlier, quite personally, was inspiring. And with everything we see on the media, which I would also agree, you have to be careful with what you consume. I intentionally went to some news outlets just to be open-minded and see what it is they're talking about. And it was devastating. And I'm a little bummed that it turned out to be violent later in the evening on Saturday.
Yeah.
But a lot of people another group of people have capitalized on that particular aspect of everything, the violence, which takes away from the point here. I just wish that those people instead turn their focus to, well, why are people out here to begin with? Why did they have to go to that? Why are they doing that? And who are these people that are doing that? What are their stories?
Right.
I will say that Sunday was what Grand Rapids is. Having lived in this area for 8 years now, the hospitality, I believe that the people are good people, and I believe that they want a change. They want something better. I believe that they don't necessarily support. Not everyone here supports racial injustice. I think they're learning and trying to figure out what do they do. how do they identify these biases and what do they do about it?
Yeah.
It's been inspiring to see people figure out what to do. And Sunday was an example of, all right, this is who we are. We don't agree with the violence. We're going to help clean up. We're going to be a community. And hearing, statements from different companies saying, we stand against racial injustices. What happened to George? No one should have to live through this. It's just been all in all inspiring. And like I said, I'll echo your words, Derrick. Hope.
Yeah. So I'll just touch on that just one last time here, just because you made a real good point, Carlson. This is we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? Something we haven't seen in over a century. And we've been asking people to stay home, to stay safe, and stay away from people. But then we did make the conscious choice to go out there to say, hey, we need to be heard. Again, racism is a public health issue, right? It's a public health issue, and there's so much evidence and data behind it, and it actually shows how racism and maybe encounter with law enforcement, how it affects people, depending on how that encounter goes. And there's just so much around that we can talk about. But then just acknowledging, hey, this is a public health issue. This is something that affects us in every single way. Yeah. It's important to voice our opinions about it. And Carlson made a good point about companies, individuals, people making up statements and denouncing what we've seen. It actually just tells us, hey, there's actually more good people out there than there are bad people.
Yeah.
And but if I'm being honest, I was a little bit disappointed with the way some people, of course, analyzed it. So talking about where we get our news from and how we digest it. There's people who spun the narratives around, and the way they approach it is just not fair. So I think us three on this call, we're gonna agree. Violence is not the way to go about it. Yeah. Destroying property is not the way to go about it. Looting is not the way to go around it. But then just taking a step back and saying, why are these people doing this? Like, there's just all these ramifications for doing this. So why would people still choose to do this, right? Yeah. Again, it's because of the system they've been caught in, the system of oppression, the system of poverty, and just all those different societal ills that play against them. So I personally denounce just, violence and going about it that way, but I also understand where those people are coming from. Yeah. And for those of us who have been very critical of them this week, saying, hey, I hate all these people because they did this, did that. I don't like that they did that either. But also I acknowledge they came from somewhere. There's something that pushed them to be there. And until we actually use our voices to address the cause of that, really, we won't be successful to ending the violence and the looting. And I really hope it ends. But still, if we don't go upstream to solve the problem, we're just going to be wasting time downstream trying to block it.
Well, I have got a couple of points that you hit on there. And, first off, I come from a belief system that racism is a symptom. It's not something that we've created. It's been created because of a larger issue. And yep. And that larger issue is not having an understanding of what love means, yep. Not having an understanding of what community and belonging mean, not understanding what unity means, yep. And really making sure that we're defining things in the same way. Because how many times do we assume just in our egotistical level that we understand because we assume that the person knows what we're talking about. We assume that the person is using the same language.
Right.
And so I think it's also got to start with how we define things. And if you're choosing love as a value, then standing up and saying those people are wrong, those people are bad, that's not from a way of love.
Right.
A way of love is trying to find a way through that empowers the community, that inspires the community. It's not pointing the finger.
Right.
And I think, you know, one of the things that I loved about Sunday, and I will wholeheartedly admit, you guys, I left on such a high from that protest. I could have I was like, we're conquering the world. Like, it was amazing because I was so inspired by, because it was all the people, right?
Yep.
It was all the people. And that was my first experience like that. And so it was so moving. And then I came home on Saturday night and I'm writing, you know, I'm writing my daily blog, which it has to do, you know, I incorporated being at the protest and what was happening and how just amazing and hopeful and everything. And then I catch on Facebook, and then I'm all of a sudden watching all the destruction on Facebook. And there's a woman in town who owns the restaurant Amore. Her name is Jenna. I'm not even going to try and pronounce her last name, but you'll know her as Chef Jenna. If you ever see her, she's got bright pink hair. She does such an amazing reach in this community to get back to us being people. And she was doing a live. She's been doing a live every night since COVID-19 happened, where she just has these massage chair chronicles and just sits and talks with everybody. And I literally looked at her and I just started crying because she just was like, you could see she just is running out of hope. Like, in that moment, there was no hope. And it was still putting herself out there in a way to say, I don't know where to start, but this has got to change. Like, I don't know where to start. This is heartbreaking. And for somebody for me to see her vulnerability like that, and knowing how many other people's cups she fills on an hourly and daily basis, I was like, something's got to change. Like, we, you know, because we can't have our leaders like running out of this hope. And so we all have to take on a responsibility of creating that hope.
Right.
And Sunday blew me away too, because it was facing the destruction coming. Like, I went there and just got into all of the feels of the hopelessness and the hopefulness and everything that combined it. And I think we need to take action. And I know that it starts with conversations like this. And I'm calling on anybody that is listening to this, that this is resonating with, that you can see it from a perspective other than your own, to stand up and start speaking out for values such as love and values such as compassion and empathy, because to me, that's the root of the issue. We're not teaching how to get to those big emotions. We're not defining joy. And I love Brene Brown so much, because she has come up with these definitions from hundreds and hundreds of people research. And she is a research queen, and she has defined these definitions directly from all the people. And she puts it in a way that, like, we need to start introducing these new definitions into any system that we have, because through COVID-19 and then this all, like, what it's amplifying is what you were saying, Derrick, is that we've got systems that aren't working.
Yep. Right. So, and it takes us both, right, Dustin? It takes people from both sides. It takes white people and it takes Black people. We need to, you know, that's where the leaning into compassion comes from. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown.
Yeah, I love her.
It's, you know, it's just taking that time to truly understand and genuinely understand what people face and what they have to deal with. I went on a walk today and stopped at a friend's house. This is an older white couple.
Okay.
I love them, and you know, we just got into some really good conversation about everything that's happening right now, and they said some things that I didn't necessarily agree with and I wasn't aligned with. And my knee-jerk reaction was to say, hey, I disagree with you. When you say that, this is what it means. That means you're inconsiderate. That means you are close-minded. But what happens is when you react like that, people build up barriers, they build up walls, and actually shun away from the issue at hand. That's actually not helping. That's hurting the situation. And so I had to keep my emotions and my knee-jerk reaction in check. But then I took the time to listen and to understand where they're coming from. We talked about the violence, and I used it as an opportunity to share with them, the stories that these people have that we don't necessarily see, the things that happen in the background, the things that they have to deal with that we don't necessarily see, the homes that they come from, and the schools that they went to, the hand that they've been dealt all their lives. And so when we start to look at it from that perspective, it really changes our reaction to it. And I just loved your reaction. The gentleman said, I never thought about it from that perspective. You make a really good point, and talked about how he was raised as a Dutch person. You got your work, you do your work, you get your reward, and that's just how he raised his kids. But well, the kids in the Black community, that's not their reality, right? They don't have those same opportunities. They have different circumstances. They're dealt a different hand. And that's, in my opinion, is the hard work that we have to do. It's the hard work that we have to engage in. Those honest and genuine conversations. The easy thing is to build walls. The hard thing is to listen with not the intention to respond, but the intention to understand. And I have a lot of friends that I've asked them a question: how many Black friends do you have? And it's just not a whole lot. And so if you don't have friends that are different from you, well, how else are you gonna get to know that story? How else are you going to understand where they come from, so you can truly empathize? So getting to know these people first, having them in your circles, engaging in conversations like this with an open mind, with the intent to understand, not the intent to disagree or to share your opinion.
Yeah. Also, I really like your example there, especially citing your conversation with the couple today. So you just taking time to, explain to them where some of these people might have been coming from, the kind of cards they were dealt, and how that's driving them to make the decisions they're making today, right? So, for example, we know here, like, one of the things we're protesting against, we're voicing against, voices against, is just institutional racism, right? And we know that's just discrimination that exists in the processes of our social institutions based on your race. So, for example, a very good example I can think of would be just segregation by race, where we have predominantly white neighborhoods or predominantly Black neighborhoods. And if you even go back to history, to redlining and all the ills of back then, those things still live with us today. So you have, say, a zip code or a neighborhood where it's underfunded, the school systems are underfunded. They don't necessarily have the best or well-trained teachers or the best resources. And those kids, compared to their white counterparts, they already dealt a shorter hand. So growing up already, that's going to determine their life expectancy. It's certainly going to determine how much they make. It's going to determine what kind of jobs they have, and it's going to determine, how they interact with law enforcement. And all those things actually go a long way to determine the outcomes of life. And similar to what we're seeing with all the killings today of unarmed Black men. So it's really sad to say we've come a long way, but there's still a lot to do. And we want to talk about inequity. For example, looking back in the 1970s, just think about this. So say for $1 a white household made, a black household only made about 59 cents. That was in the 1970s. So coming over today, say in the 2010s, 2015, there was no change, still the same thing. And as I speak to you today, just I kind of review recent research to try to stay on top of it. And still for $1, a white family makes, a black household makes about just over 60 cents still. And so it's true, we're having these conversations and we're trying to make it better, but also we're gonna need policy, we're gonna need those conversations, and even more than those conversations, to address what we're actually seeing today.
Yeah. Now, can you guys, so this is a word that I'm hearing thrown around, and it's kind of one of those words that I think a lot of things are getting lumped into. How do you guys define privilege?
All right. So for me, first of all, that's a really good question, because when we take a step back, I think most often what I've seen people do is they define it from one angle, like, hey, you get the advantage of doing all of this, right? So privilege, if I was to define it, I would say it's how we benefit or we don't benefit from our characteristic, from something we have, knowingly or unknowingly.
Okay.
So, for example, a white middle-aged man is perceived as a leader. He's perceived as the active voice in the room. So we get in the room, he gets that power right away. That's just what society has normalized. And then going to the other side of the scale, a black woman will be looked down on. Right. So again, that's privilege. So privilege really, it can come in so many forms. So just the fact that you're not going to be judged based on how you wear your hair, that's some form of privilege.
Okay.
And then and then looking at black women who might get a call from HR for wearing braids or for wearing the natural hair, that's sad, and that's privilege, that's counter privilege, if that's a word.
We'll make it up. I like it. Counter privilege.
We'll make it up. Yeah.
Okay.
And then so it's really anything, any way we benefit from a system that oppresses another person. So that's how I'll put privilege in simple terms.
Okay. Now, Carlson, is that
Right.
the same definition for you too?
Yeah, I'd say the same. I think a word that you used there, Derrick, knowingly or unknowingly, I think really exemplifies what privilege, in my opinion, is. You're born with, and others are not born with. It's just not something that you even take the time to accept that you have, or humble enough to say that you have that, right? And we talk about rights and equality, and unfortunately, not everyone has those same freedoms and those same rights. At least they're not exercised for this group of people. For example, if I'm pulled over as a black person and I talk about my rights and I speak up for myself, it's different from I believe if a white person was pulled over and they talk the same, the outcome could be completely different. I know an example that's been used recently is white folks protesting at the governor's office to get back to life as usual because of the strict restrictions and stay-at-home orders due to COVID-19, and exercising their rights in having arms. Whereas, to be quite honest with you, if those were a group of black people, the outcome really would be different. So to me, just that realization that in some cases we don't even know that we have this, we can speak of, but not the other person. That is, you know, in my opinion, what privilege is.
Right.
Yeah, you said
Carlson,
something, you said something so powerful, like humble enough to know that we have it. I want the audience to hear that, because I think that that's a root cause. I think that that's a root cause of a lot of our actions, is
Right.
that we're not humble enough to know that we have it. And, you know, for me, privilege, I see people using this word privilege in lots of different ways. And that's kind of why I wanted to ask, you know, because I look at it as convenience.
Yep.
And I also had to make my way to gratitude.
Yep.
On the dark nights of my soul, when I've gone through different experiences in life and I was at a place where I wanted to die or didn't think I was worth anything, like those moments, I had to find the gratitude. And once finding that gratitude and seeing those things as blessings, I've also been super blessed to meet people and see stories where they came from different countries, where they didn't have clean water, where they didn't have, they had to fight for their life. Like, I met this 19-year-old who was working 3 jobs here, who I was Ubering, and he came from a place where literally his best friend had just gotten shot. He was trying to get his fiance, who was 19, out of the country. He was so in love and wanted to marry her, and that's why he was working so hard. And we got into a discussion about what it's like to live your life when you're in fear of you're in fear of that, your safety every single day.
Right.
To me, like, that is my privilege.
Yep.
To not have that experience, and it is also my gratitude, and then turning that into a responsibility.
Right.
Right.
Dustin, that's a really powerful story you share there. And you really make a good point about, you know, what privilege really is, in acknowledging your own privilege. And I just want to add to it, to our conversation here, to say, hey, privilege doesn't mean everything comes easy for you. It doesn't mean everything is handed to you in a gold plate, like, hey, here you go. It means you work hard for those things, yeah. But there's someone who actually works hard, but still needs to go an extra mile just because of how they're perceived, right? So, for example, you can hear people's stories, you can do surveys. There's studies out there by psychology experts where you can read up. You'd actually see how people perceive you already affect the opportunity they're going to give you, the chances of them granting you an opportunity. So we say we have Carlson and Derrick going for a job interview, for example, and you submit your name, and you submit your resumes with your name on it. Already, my name, for example, my last name is Chia. I've had someone told me, hey, I thought I showed up to, when I just moved here, actually, that's a funny story. I showed up to my driving test to get a driver's license.
Uh-huh.
My driving instructors looked at me when I got there. He's like, "You're Chia?" I'm like, "Yeah." He nods his head like he's saying no. I'm like, "What?" He said, "Well, this guy, he was like a young adult in his same mid-60s that I was expecting to see an Asian." So he tells me that, and then I just smile about it. I was like, "Oh, okay." And so he then starts asking me, "You know how we drive here, right? You know we don't drive here how we do in Africa, right?" And it was all jokes the whole time until he failed me. Yeah, and the reason he failed me was, well, that's a whole different story. We can do a new podcast on it, but it was just so unfair. And I think he already had some implicit bias from the onset of it,
Yeah.
just from seeing my name and knowing I was foreign.
Yeah.
And then me showing up again, not being who he thought I was going to be. And so there was already that barrier right there. So that's just going to show, hey, even your name can actually give you privilege.
I got to say something about that, because I will say that growing up as a female with
Right.
a name Dustin,
Right.
I can't tell you how many millions of times I have hear on a daily basis,
Right.
isn't that a guy's name?
Right.
Who named you Dustin?
Right.
Or underestimated me in some way that they felt the need to express themselves. And
Right.
when I was younger, I would have said that that was a curse. I wanted to change my name.
Yep.
As I have grown older, I have known that that has just built my skin.
Yep. Yep.
But
Used to
I
thick
get
skin.
that. I understand just being underestimated and viewed in a certain way for your name.
Yep. So those are some of those things we talk about. You can be aware, you might not even be aware that's working for your interest or not in the background.
Yeah.
But then just to say, hey, there's actually people out there who go through what you go to,
Yeah.
but they still don't get the same outcomes like you do because of some factor, maybe because of how they look, because of how they speak, because of them being disabled or not. So there's just different layers to privilege out here.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I like how you show that there's layers to it as well. Like it lives in all areas. And I think that this is really like the depth of how we need to start looking at things and just start unpacking some of these things again to find that common language and just have a perspective of what the other, you know, a relatable way.
Right.
Right. One thing I add, Dustin, and as I thought through how you married privilege and gratitude, it made me even think about where Derrick and I come from.
Mm-hmm.
Having been raised in Africa and coming here and seeing completely two different worlds.
Yeah.
In a way, we're privileged because we're here. Not in a way, we are privileged because we're here. We do understand the realities from how we grew up, from basic needs like food and education and whatnot, to being in a place where you can have a job, for instance, or you can have an education, you can, you know, I could list all kinds of benefits and experiences and aspects of this system that, you know, we don't have in Cameroon. But, you know, thinking about the situation at hand, I think it's just privilege to be able to go out there and protest and make one's voice known, whereas a lot of people around the world don't necessarily have that, or if they did, you know, they could be killed because of it. So just to say that it truly relates to gratitude. And as I think about America, having lived here and obviously having experienced what life in Cameroon is like, I will say that the rest of the world looks up to America. We consume the whether it's the products or the services, the media of America. A lot of people, a lot of countries do what they're doing. Well, if America is doing it, then we can do it. So I think that is, again, just a completely different dimension and view on privilege. Not that it necessarily applies to our conversation about racial injustices, but just having the privilege and the opportunity to make your voice known, to vote, to make a change, I think is something every person in America who has the ability to do that has to recognize.
Yeah. I have to share a story with you guys. I am being so called to share this story. So when I was Uber driving, when COVID started happening, this was right before they shut down the airports. And I picked up a gentleman, and in my Uber description as an Uber driver, I call myself a modern day prophet, and how I'm always looking for the God in you. And so he gets in the car, and I could see he looked beat down, like completely beat down. And he asked me, so I read your profile, so how do you look for the God in me? And I opened up this conversation with him. And it turns out he's a guitarist for a pretty well-known band, and I was taking him to the Van Andel. And I asked him, like, what was a life-changing moment that he had? And he actually works for this nonprofit to bring clean water to people in Africa. And he shared a story with me, and I want to share this story with you because it touched me, and hopefully I told him I was going to tell this story. I just won't mention his name. But he was there, and they were digging these wells to bring the specific tribe clean water. And what they had currently was this just pit of just undrinkable water, basically, where the people would wait for hours filling up these water bottles, filling up these buckets, whatever they had to fill up for water. And so they get there, and he said he was doing something, and he was wearing these cargo pants, and he had a bottle of Aquafina in his cargo pocket, and it had this little bit of water in it. Like, it wasn't even a quarter way full, but it was just barely empty. And this little boy came up and stole the water bottle. And he was pissed. He's like, I was mad. I couldn't figure out, if he wanted water so bad, I would have given him the case. And if he only asked for it. And so he goes, he's going on, and he's like, and maybe 4 or 5 hours later, this little boy comes back and the water bottle's full. And this little kid took the water bottle and went and waited at this place where they got water, because he noticed that the water bottle was empty, and he went and filled it up for this man. Oh. And this is a story that this band shares a lot, and it's become a pretty connective story to a story that I've known as the cookie thief. But it shows his knee-jerk reaction through the entire thing, and then shows what this boy's intentions were, and shows how his first knee-jerk reaction was to go to ego. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something that's really missing in our society, is we don't know how to bridge that gap between our ego, because we all have one. We all experience those. You said it very well, I think, Carlson. You said, my knee-jerk reaction, I had to be intentional with my action. Like, you took that pause before you reacted, because we're not going to be absent of those egotistical things. We're bred in a society in the United States, in America, we're breeding a very egotistical society, but there's levels below it. And so a story like that, to me, just always makes me check that knee-jerk reaction, because what he said is that he has always tried to model his life off of that little boy, and model his giving and his unconditional as that little boy did in one action of going and filling up his water bottle. Right. And it moved me. Like, that just moved me so much. And that is just a perfect example too, I think, of where our privilege and our convenience can, like, our egos can get in the way of that, or not in the way, or maybe our egos can tell that story in a different way, that they took something from me. And if we can recognize and realize that nobody can take anything from you. Mm-hmm. Nobody can take anything from you unless you let them, and to be able to have those reactions within our ego and still come out with a better action. We acknowledge it. We don't have to consume it. We don't have to let it consume us. We acknowledge that that was our initial reaction, and then we move through with an action based on love.
Right.
Oh, are you muted?
Oh yeah, I was muted. Okay. Yep. So just saying, that's really inspiring. I'm just sitting here and I'm just like, oh my goodness, that's really, really, that's a powerful story. And I'm just sitting here reflecting on it, and trying to put myself in this gentleman's shoes. So say his first reaction was to think, oh, this kid stole from me. And then this kid had a different impression. In his mind, he's trying to help this guy. Just maybe, I don't know, maybe language was a barrier where he couldn't say, hey, can I help you? Or maybe it's
I don't know what the
right.
I don't know what the barrier there was.
Right. And it could also be a cultural thing where, like in my culture, if you see something, say there's a vessel of water and it's empty, it's just right for you to pick it up and go fill it and bring it back over there. So there's like multiple things that can be playing into this.
Mhm.
And that really just inspires me to see, hey, the culture we're living in, this thing like Carlson kind of alluded to earlier, just moving here has really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. So to just to know, hey, there's several ways to do something, you know, because I look at something this way doesn't mean that's the only way to look at it. There's times when right now I'm talking with my friends or my colleagues at work, and I look at something and what I see in it, they might see something different. And we all really just look at ourselves and we're like, this is really powerful. And it's really just inspiring. And it comes back to the culture around here and how we see things, what we normalize, and how that all builds up to help our perception of different things. So say, for example, if you're in a culture where the first thing is, hey, I only want to guard what's mine and mine alone, like that water bottle is mine, or this is just for me, my wife, and my kids. Like, you know, you don't even say hi to your neighbors. You don't relate with any of them. So we grow up, your kids grow up with that mentality, like, hey, it's all about, it's us versus them. It's not us and them. And so that kind of translates then to other things we do. You go out somewhere and maybe someone can really just be approaching you to see, hey, how's your day going? And then what do? Your first reaction is to close up and start running away. And we've seen this over and over. If we want to bring this back to our main topic of the day about race, I cannot tell you how many times people have walked off the sidewalk just so I can walk past them, and just stuff like that. Because again, people grow up with this implicit bias about, hey, people who look like this are gonna hurt you, or people who sound like this are gonna hurt you, and so they're just so close about everything. But then, you know, like I said earlier, I believe there's more good people out here.
Yeah.
It could really just be someone trying to help you, but then the first thing in your mind is, hey, they're trying to hurt me. Again, I do acknowledge that people need to look out for themselves, but I think we need to do a better job balancing out, hey, that's someone just living their life versus this black man is trying to hurt me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I used to live over in Ramblewood, which was over in kind of the Granville in Wyoming. And there used to be a gentleman that I used to live at the end of the woods, and there used to be a gentleman that would he was looking for cans, and he was a black man, and he was looking for cans, and he was always out there between like 1:30 and 3 in the morning. And it was when I was getting home from, you know, bartending, and I would get home and, you know, he'd ask me if I had any cans, and I started a conversation with him. And I, you know, I saw him during the day too, but there was a neighbor that her and I were walking together, and he was actually out during the daytime. And he starts to kind of approach her, and I could see her scared. I could see her back off, and I just asked her, I said, well, why did you do that? And she said, well, he's always out here at like 2:00 in the morning. And, you know, and I said, yeah, I said, he is. And I said, have you ever talked to him? And I said, because, you know, he's pretty cool. And she said, no. She's like, but for whatever reason, she felt unsafe. And I just brought up the point to her. I said, the reason why he's out here between 1:30 and 2 or 3 in the morning is because of the reaction that he just got from you.
Right.
And like, after speaking with him, that's a hard reaction to manage all the time. When you're just trying to do something, you're trying to do whatever work you can to stay alive. You're trying to do whatever work you can to feed your family, to, you know, whatever. And like that, just seeing that reaction from her, and just in understanding, because I'm a woman too. There are times that I've been in areas that I have felt unsafe. I felt unsafe to all different kinds of colors, because I've been in all different kinds of cities, and I usually end up walking around during the nighttime when maybe I shouldn't be. But it gives me an experience to walk around and not be afraid, and to walk around and meet the people that are out during that time. And I've had to allow myself to just put that fear aside, because I don't want to miss anything. Like, I don't want to miss an experience of getting to know somebody. And there was something that was just really profound when I saw her react like that. And when I put it together, you know, after speaking with him, that it was actions like that that he had to go through all the time.
Yep. So I really like the way you look at this, Dustin, because you made a really good point. And I think if he had it his way, he wouldn't choose to be out there that night, right? And so maybe he's really just trying to feed himself. Maybe that's the only option he has.
Mm-hmm.
But then he's faced with people running away from him, or maybe saying mean things to him. But then that's just a scenario that could happen. And then, what's it gonna push him to do now? Like, he wouldn't have any other choice. And this all comes down to, I just like linking everything up to the possible outcomes. Say that might lead to some sort of isolation. Like, no one wants to deal with someone who walks around at night and picks up stuff because he looks dangerous. He's perceived as he's out here to get me. And that's certainly going to take a toll. That's probably going to take a toll on his mental health. And that's going to go down probably to suicide. And, or say he doesn't go down to suicide, say he develops some mental health issues, and say he has some law enforcement encounter because of his mental health problems, it might not end up well from him, right?
Yeah.
So we know about one of the studies that was published in 2016 with data from 17 states across the country, actually showed that over 20% of fatal law enforcement encounters happen to people who have a history of mental health disorder within the last 4 months. Looking at over 20%. So look at another example of the killing of unarmed Black people. Just say, for example, they were suffering from some mental health disorder. Those could have been prevented somehow.
Yeah.
So that's just another spin I'm trying to insert there, so we can look at that through that lens too.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, our mental health issues have exponentially increased.
Yep.
And that was before COVID. That was before all these additional pressures that we had and some of the breaking of these systems. Like there are some, we saw it on Saturday, like that's desperation.
Yep.
Violence and destruction, that's just a symptom of desperation, of hopelessness.
Yep.
Carlson, what do you think about that?
No, I couldn't agree more with Derrick. A lot of times we don't see, all we see is the face. We don't see what's behind the face. And again, I believe that's the hard work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
I don't think everyone understands what Black people have to think about and have to go through on a daily basis. Just the different things that feed into that mental health stability is just unfair that is a group of people's realities. And then when we see a certain outcome, we are claiming as though we're oblivious to the reality here.
Yeah.
So I think really acknowledging that, really peeling back into this issue, going back to the root cause, if you would, in our systems and decades of, this systems, will we be able to actually solve the issue here? And I will acknowledge that it will take time. It's not going to happen next year nor the year after. We can do a reform to our police, but the issue will just show up in another form, in another system. Today it's the police, tomorrow it will be something else, right? How do we change people's mindsets? So how do we ensure that people's mindsets are changed so that it's true equality, that life, liberty, for all? It's gonna take hard work, but we need to start now because we know that it's gonna take time.
Absolutely.
we know that the mindsets need to change, not only the systems. We need to start now to be able to get there.
You know, you brought up something that has been a huge passion of mine, and I say, you know, education system, but when I say education system, I mean from kindergarten to your last breath. Like that kind of education system, because to, you know, I think we point the finger a lot at different things, saying oh, it's the younger people, or it's the younger generation, or it's the millennials, or however people want to frame that, because everybody's got a story. I think it's the way that we educate about mindset, and it's the way that we educate about learning these things as abilities, like not something that we have or don't have, but learning these as abilities of something that we can build, and something that we can grow, and something that we can strengthen. And so the teaching that I do in like the workshops and stuff is all about bringing it down to these really simple tools that anybody that's sitting in the chair from a kindergarten to 90 years old can understand, because it's simple. Like this stuff is simple. And even if you're listening to this podcast right now and you're thinking that this is too big, that it's going to take too long, that there's not enough of us, if you've got any kind of doubts if this is possible, if you took the responsibility in your life and just changed the filter to, is this hurtful or is this helpful? And you filtered your actions through that one thing, you could make a profound difference in this life.
Yep.
And that's something that all of us can teach, because all the way through the protest on Saturday to it turning to this, it's coming from actions that aren't helpful. It's coming from a place that isn't helpful. This doesn't move us forward in a better way together. And if you really look at it, ego is me and spirit is we. So we also need to take a good hard look at how science and spirit need to be integrated into everything that we do. Because then in situations where we've got those knee-jerk reactions to things, then we can look at it and I can at least stop and take that pause and ask myself, is this hurtful or is this helpful?
Right. And helpful or hurtful, not only for you, but for the other person, for the recipient. It could be helpful for you, but hurtful for them. It could be, all right, I'm gonna speak my mind up. This is what I believe in. This is how it should be. And I expect you to be that way if you would. But how do you ensure that it is truly helpful for that other person, which is, you know, that extra layer, that extra step that you have to take to ensure that at the end of the day, your message is received with the intention you mean it to, that helpful intention.
Yeah. Well, and that's where, to me, that spirit is integrated. We have to integrate the spirit of we, and that moves us from that egotistical, you know, the egotistical layer of is it helpful just to me or is it helpful to the we?
Right.
Because I don't think that it's one or the other as far as like winning or losing. I think it's our model of literally looking for the win-win-win situation. And we're not really taught to do that. At least in my education, I wasn't taught to do that. I didn't learn that until 5 or 6 years ago when I started diving into business. And I went, well, how come we just can't use this in all of our relationships? I mean, it's so simple, but that's where it kind of spawned this idea and this passion of mine to start integrating that into our education systems, because the we needs to be heard. Like the we needs to be acknowledged. The we, like, we're stronger together.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep. I think you and Carlson really just make a really beautiful point here, pointing out, hey, some of this change is really going to need to come from the heart, right? So there's probably a list of policies out there. If you want to say, hey, let's create committees or let's look at all the policies that we can actually change at an organizational level, at a societal level. There's a list of them, There's people, there's experts who know way more about this than any of us do, and they're working on this. But then, if as individuals we don't make that commitment to genuinely make that change, all of that is just going to be policy on paper. Yeah. So I'm actually going to paraphrase something Mahatma Gandhi said a while ago, where he said, if we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. So until we make that commitment to say, hey, I want to be a better person. How would I like to be treated? And then act in that way. That's really how we see those ripple effects. And I really believe, one man can change the world. Because as you live that life, someone else is going to copy it. Someone else is going to see it. And like I said, this last few days have been really inspiring despite all the unfortunate incidences. But just seeing and hearing, listening to other podcasts, reading and hearing conversations other people are having. Like I saw this kid today having a conversation with her parents who she's trying to tell their parents why she thinks Black Lives Matter, and their parents are trying to convince her why that's just left propaganda. And so it was really just inspiring watching that conversation. I was like, we just need more people who actually understand what it's about like this.
Yeah.
And just saying, hey, Black Lives Matter doesn't mean all lives don't matter. It doesn't mean white lives don't matter. It doesn't mean Asian lives don't matter or Hispanic lives. All lives matter. Just because we said Black Lives Matter doesn't mean the other lives don't matter. But then look at who's being oppressed most. Of course, it is Black lives. The data shows it, right? Yeah. So it just comes down to the point where we just have to be more empathetic and be like, how would I like to be treated, and act in the same way.
Well, and you brought up a really, really good point. Let's stop competing for our bad behaviors.
Right.
We can. One of the things that I walked away with so much from Saturday and after our conversations about really, because I go over what's the root cause of this, and we're basically, it's when we judge ourselves off of, we're judging our greatness off other people's bad behavior.
Yep.
And we're doing that a lot.
Yep. It is a lot, and sometimes it's really scary, because you see some reactions sometimes, and you hear all those judgments that are being made based on other people's behavior, and now those judgments are applying to you because you're associated with that. And you just stop for a second and you say, hey, like, what's happening? And it's really just sad. And if I'm being honest, I'm short of words to talk about it, honestly.
Good point there, Derrick, about laws and about these experts and all the data. I think it really helps bring to light the issue, and I really hope that if nothing else, at least that convinces some people out there that this is real. Just hearing that a Black man is 2.5 times more likely to be shot by a police officer than your white counterpart. That is the reality. It's not just, Black men are being shot. That is a fact.
Yeah.
When you talked about laws, it made me think about President Obama's article that he wrote just around, what might we do? And I'd encourage everyone to read that, whether you are a Republican or a Democrat. It doesn't matter. I think it's just really good information.
I might get that link from you.
Okay, yeah.
Put that in the podcast. So if you can send that link to that article, if people want to read it, I'd love to read it too. So
certainly, and he really talks about us taking action through voting and talking about our police systems. These are and our local government are really the place where the change starts, right? A lot of times we just think about the president, but he talks about as individuals, we can actually make our voices known. We can actually vote for our mayors who and our county executives who appoint and ensure that the right people essentially are in these positions to be able to influence. So I think that that's a good action step in terms of what could an individual do right now. Yeah. And a lot of times change doesn't happen overnight. A lot of times we want that change right now, but unfortunately it's going to take a while. But we have to start now if we want to reap the benefits decades from now, or maybe we might not even be the ones to reap those benefits. Maybe it'll be our children and our grandchildren. But aren't we standing on the shoulders of people who came before us? Absolutely. Right? Our grandparents, our forefathers, and it's only fair to do that for others.
Well said, my friend. I love that. Well, you guys, so we're kind of running a little bit long here. I want to ask you guys, and this is a question that I am going to ask everybody on my podcast. So finish this sentence for me. It was tough, but it taught me.
To seek to understand.
Something that really changed your life. It was tough, but it taught me.
It was tough, but it taught me to seek to understand.
What was tough?
Going through the emotions of the reality of racism embedded in our systems, in our in people, and sometimes it's very evident in conversations. It's very evident in people's stance on these conversations. So that was tough.
And what has it taught you?
It's taught me to seek to understand. It's taught me to seek to package my message in a way that will be impactful. It won't be a finger pointing message. It will be, well, also look at it from this standpoint. And like the story I shared today, I left that conversation walking back home, feeling like I had a meaningful experience today, feeling like I made a little bit of a difference. I made the world a little better. And I think it's those little things that have cascading effects.
Okay. Derrick, what about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna hate to make this sound really simple, but I would say it was tough, but it's made me tougher.
Okay. What was tough?
Right. So that's a really great question, Derrick, because just looking back at the young man who was recently killed, one of some of his last words, I can't breathe, right? There's times when emotionally it's like I cannot breathe either, just because of things that go about, things that happen around me, things that are directed towards me. And like I said, I like seeing the glass half full, and so I choose to not talk about my own experiences with some more ignorant people. But if it's taught me one thing, it's just to develop thicker skin and to be tougher, because I've been in situations where I'm like, hey, I can just drop this. Why don't I just drop this and lash out? And, just like, your body is trying to do something, but you're like, hey, let's not do this because we're going to just conform with what they think of us. Let's handle this different. So it's taught me to be tougher, to control myself a lot better, and to actually be a tool to play my own part in making a change. So in any way, like I'm always happy to help out anyone I can, especially in issues around injustice or equity, or really anything around social justice. And really, because from my own experiences and some things I've experienced happen to other people, it just taught me to actually face those things and not shy away from it. Have those tough conversations, and which actually reminds me, I I've been doing some active reading, just recommending stuff for people who are like, hey Derrick, like I want to know your thoughts on this, or I'm looking for a resource to help with this. And you know, if I'm being honest with you, a lot of my black brothers and sisters are tired. They're tired of always telling you, hey, you can't tell this is insensitive. You cannot tell a black person this. You cannot do this. You cannot do that. A lot of my black brothers and sisters are tired of that, and I totally get it. And I just think my own experiences has taught me, hey, do not give up on this, right? And let's keep pushing for that change. And so I think it's taught me to develop that thick skin and just always trying to hang in there and keep pushing people to where I think they're looking to be.
I love that, you guys. I just can't even, there are no words to tell you how honored I am to have had this conversation with you two. You both are so outspoken, and just meeting you on Saturday, when I meet certain people, I immediately just want to put my hand over my heart. And it was so funny because Deontay was telling me a little bit about greeting people, and you greeting people with your hand over your heart. And I said, I always, when I speak about the people that I love, I always put my hand over my heart. And I think that you guys are just hand over the heart people.
I'm going to put my hand over my heart.
You are hand over the heart people for sure. And I just keep going how you're going, keep doing what you're doing. And I don't pretend to have had the experiences that you have had, but I will stand next to you and be a voice for you and for the good of us all until I die. and do or die, I'm in this to make a change. And I feel like you guys are in this. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And I want you to remember this when you're in a situation, when you're tired, and you start to have those down moments, because we're all going to have those down moments. And I believe that in ways they've just started in a whole new level as we go through this awakening as human beings. So you can use this to fill your cup and just remember how much you've impacted just one person, and just how honored I am for you guys to be here. And I'm so happy that this worked out, that you guys found me.
Hey, Dustin, thanks a lot. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here today. Thanks for all the good work you're doing. Please keep it up. Now more than ever before, we need strong allies. We need people who are gonna, come out and voice their opinions too. And just going forward to, like Carlson said earlier, making that change comes from within, but also we need to go out and vote. Like, what leaders are we electing into offices, and what do they stand for? What are their beliefs? Just all of that. So just going forward, we need the strong allies. And thank you for all your hard work you're doing. And I hope to talk to you again sometime soon.
Oh, absolutely. We will definitely stay in touch.
Thanks a lot, Dustin. Appreciate your work, and excited for the fruit that comes out of this, and for the other interviews that you're going to have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, one last question, you guys. So if people are interested in, how are people reaching out to you? Are people, what can you give if people want to support this mission that we're talking about, this vision that we're talking about? I know anybody can get a hold of me and start a conversation with me. What's the best way that we can support you guys?
Yeah, great question there, Dustin. I think first things first, we need to talk about advocacy. So again, we say silence in times like this really is equivalent to supporting the oppression. So there's this quote that says, a threat to say injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I think now that really applies to us right now. So advocacy, speak out when you see something that's wrong. Hold each other accountable, hold our leaders accountable, vote vote and vote. Educate ourselves. So teach ourselves about what we don't know. Go out of our comfort zones, read books. There's really great documentaries and shows out there. And shout out to Ava DuVernay. She's done a great job highlighting some of the issues we're still facing today. We have to teach our kids too. Some of these kids, like we say, they grow up and they really don't understand what's happening. And we're shying away from having these conversations with them. So we need to start having those conversations with them, because that's the only way actually we can guarantee that your white kid isn't going to shoot my black kid in 20 years from now. So we need to have those conversations with kids too. And like I talk about voting, and advocating for changes at the policy level.
Okay. Carlson, what about you?
No, I completely echo Derrick there. You know, talking about the fact that we come from Cameroon and our view of America. I know that America is better than this. There's no question about it.
Oh, yeah.
I know, and I am confident that seeing those people out there standing up and speaking up, I am very optimistic about this turning point, if you would. But now we have to go to work.
Yeah,
now is the time to do
action.
Exactly, to put it into action.
Yeah.
And again, seeing companies stand up, seeing organizations stand up. It's one thing to make that statement, but now putting it into action. I think we should all hold each other accountable, whether it's at your company, whether it's with the individuals you interact with, whether it's your organizations. This is a turning point and a huge opportunity for that action. Again, America is better than this, and I am hopeful.
Yeah, I am hopeful too. I am hopeful too. Well, and you guys will stay in touch as well. And anybody that's listening to this, I am going to share this on every single platform that I have. I am going to share this on every single channel that I can tag people in. If you're listening to this and this is resonating with you, if you want to move into action, an action that you can simply do is share, comment, engage, comment. That is so helpful to extending our reach and to getting these conversations like that out there. If you guys are interested and you're listening in the audience and you're interested in having some of these conversations, please feel free to reach out to me, so we can move into action and actually take these conversations to the next level as well. So thank you guys again so much for being here tonight.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Dustin.